Today, we're telling the story of a king most people never studied, not because he didn't matter, because history chose a single symbol and let the rest fade. His name was Alfred Daniel King, A.D. King for short, the youngest son of Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King, and the younger brother of Martin Luther King Jr.
When people say the movement, they often picture microphones, podium, and one voice carrying a dream. But movements also survive because someone handles the street level reality, the anger, the fear, the retaliation, the sheer exhaustion, and I'm sorry to say, the constant threat of violence.
The idea that we're working with today is simple. History remembers the dreamer, but it forgets the brother that stood between the dream and the fire.
Whoa, that is a strong statement, but true. A.D. King was born July 30, 1930, in Atlanta, Georgia. He grew up inside the same King household that would later become a national symbol. Same faith, same discipline, the same awareness that a Black family with a public moral voice could become a target.
Yes, Dr. Weaver. Again, sad but true. And he wasn't simply just the brother. A.D. King became a Baptist minister and a civil rights activist in his own right. And he also developed a reputation for toughness, less polished than Martin, more willing to absorb conflict without turning it into a performance.
That difference matters, ladies and gentlemen, because movements need different kinds of leaders. Some leaders persuade the country, others keep the country from tearing the movement apart.
By the early 1960s, Birmingham, Alabama had become one of the most dangerous stages of the struggle. A.D. King served as pastor of the First Baptist Church of Inslee and took on leadership work during the Birmingham campaign.
And on May 11th, 1963, his home was bombed. Now, this isn't just some abstract threat here. This is a clear attack on a family, a message delivered with explosives.
So, did the family escape?
Yes, the family actually did escape. Naomi and their two children.
And did they ever catch the people who did this?
To my knowledge, no, they were never found. This is why Birmingham went into a tizzy just like it did. And I
Okay.
think, Dr. Neen, you have something to say about that.
I do. Here's the pivot point, folks, because after violence, the next question is retaliation. When a community is attacked, the pressure to strike back is real. It's emotional, it's human. God help us, not many people would be able to conduct the firm, principled nonviolence that the King brothers did.
Yeah, given all of that stuff, yeah. Later that same year, after another bombing in Birmingham, a crowd surged toward revenge. A.D. King climbed onto a car and spoke directly into the moment, trying to stop a riot before it became a massacre.
Yes, he really did, Dr. Weaver. And the line that survives in the record is stark. If you're going to kill someone, kill me. Stand up for your rights, but with non-violence. That isn't a rhetorical flourish. That is intervention. That is someone placing his own body between rage and chaos. And to me, that is hella courageous.
It absolutely is. This is what most people miss about nonviolence. It's not blind acceptance, it's not passivity, it's discipline under provocation. And sometimes it requires a person tough enough, strong enough, principled enough to tell their own side, not tonight, not like this.
One of the most telling observations about A.D. King is that he could do the work without needing the spotlight. He often operated mostly outside of the media spotlight, and people around him noted that many didn't realize how deeply involved he was.
Now, that is a particular kind of leadership. If you don't crave the camera, you can walk into rooms where the camera never goes. Meetings, negotiations, local power struggles, the unglamorous grinding work that actually shifts conditions.
The public remembers the movement through the speeches, but movements are built in other ways through logistics, moral pressure, court cases, turning out, organizing, restraint, and persistence. A.D. King was built for that layer.
Yeah. In 1965, A.D. King moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and became pastor at Zion Baptist Church. And in Louisville, he stepped into a civil rights battlefield that doesn't always get the national attention it deserves: housing.
Yes, Dr. Weaver. And housing segregation isn't just a social preference. It dictates school quality, policing, wealth accumulation, neighborhood investment, and who gets to feel safe there.
And unfortunately, it's the kind of indirect segregation that can hide behind paperwork, zoning, and custom. You don't see it the way you'd see a sign in front of a lunch counter, whites only. You see it in who can buy and where they're allowed to live.
Right. And according to the King Institute at Stanford, A.D. King was successful in a 1968 campaign for an open housing ordinance in Louisville. Now, local historical accounts also place him as a key leader in Louisville's open housing movement during his years there.
Now that means block by block organizing. That means confrontation with entrenched interests. That means arrests, threats, exhaustion, and the long grind of convincing a city to change the rules of who belongs there.
It's also where you see the pattern. Martin King's name could move the nation. A.D. King's work could move a city, and cities are where people actually live.
Yes. On April the 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis.
His brother A.D. King actually happened to be in Memphis that day. Multiple accounts placed him at the Lorraine in a room just directly beneath his brother's folks when the shot rang out. Think about that.
Think about what that means psychologically. A.D. wasn't watching history on television, he was inside it. The brother he loved was dead. He heard the crack of that rifle.
And after the assassination, there was even speculation that AD might become president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The King Institute notes that he made no effort to assume his brother's role, but continued working with SCLC efforts, including something called the Poor People's Campaign.
Now, this right here is the difference between inheriting a spotlight and inheriting a wound. Because after April 4th, 1968, the movement didn't only lose a leader, but it absorbed a shockwave that hit the people that were closest to him first.
And that's where the brother story, folks, becomes the human story. The man who could stand on a car, offer his own body, and stop a riot is now carrying grief that no organizing strategy can outmaneuver.
On July 21st, 1969, A.D. King drowned at the age of 38. He was found dead in the swimming pool at his home in Atlanta.
And you know, Dr. Weaver, did you know that this was just days before his 39th birthday?
No, I didn't know that, but yeah, I can see that.
Yep, it sure was. Authorities ruled it an accidental drowning in many retellings, but suspicion never disappeared. Some accounts emphasize that his death was viewed as mysterious and that the family raised questions. Now, I'm going to tell you something. We can't prove anything, but I will say that I believe that he was murdered. Am I saying that for sure? Absolutely not, because I wasn't there and I can't prove anything. Wasn't even born. But if I had to have my say, I believe that he was murdered.
While we can't prove what we can't prove, it stands at least as a possibility. We can name the reality when a prominent black leader dies suddenly 1 year after his brother is murdered. The unanswered questions become part of the legacy.
And the deeper point is that A.D. King's life ended the way many movement lives entered. Too early, under strain, with unresolved tension between public history and private loss.
There is a temptation in civic storytelling to compress movements into one figure. It makes the story teachable, makes the story marketable, but it also erases the infrastructure of courage.
A.D. King's work forces us to face a harder truth. Nonviolence was not just a philosophy, it was crowd control under threat. It was preventing retaliation when retaliation felt inevitable and necessary and reasonable. But no. It was keeping neighborhoods from igniting after bombings and suspicious drownings and that sort of thing. Yes.
Absolutely, Dr. Weaver. And AD's temperament mattered. A person with street credibility can say things that a symbol cannot. He could step into volatile spaces because he was known there. Now, he wasn't known as an icon, but he was known as just a man.
I think of two other examples of that. My dear friend, Dr. Samuel Proctor, and Dr. Charles Duncan, the head of the Howard University Law School. Check out our podcast on those two gentlemen for two more lesser known leaders with an awful lot of street cred. If Martin moved the conscience of America, AD, like Ralph Abernathy, Thurgood Marshall, and many others, helped keep the movement alive at ground level, where fear, anger, and danger meet.
The King Institute describes AD as committed to maintaining nonviolence in direct action campaigns and as someone whose deep involvement was often missed precisely because he stayed in the background.
Now, that's the pattern here, folks. The people who keep things together are the easiest to overlook. Sad but true, because success looks calm after the fact, and we forget how close it came to collapse in the moment.
So when you hear the movement survived, understand what that implies, folks. Someone kept it from breaking at the cost of their own emotional struggles. Someone absorbed pressure when everyone else was carrying more than they could. Someone took the hits, literal, psychological, and political, and somehow kept moving.
Okay, let's return to Birmingham for a second, because that moment is a case study. After violence, crowds can turn inward. They can splinter. They can burn their own neighborhoods in grief and fury.
A.D. King didn't just preach peace. He physically entered the crisis and demanded discipline. The historical record preserves that he appealed for non-violence directly to an outraged crowd, which was what he did when he stood up on top of his car and made that speech.
That is leadership measured in seconds, not applause, not awards of any kind, but whether you can stop the match from reaching the gasoline.
A.D. King never became a national myth. He didn't become a holiday, but he did something movements desperately need.
Absolutely. And his legacy shows up in places that people rarely connect to civil rights history. It showed up in housing fights that reshaped neighborhoods. It showed up in local organizing, and it showed up in moments where a city could have easily erupted and just didn't.
And here's the uncomfortable truth. If we only remember one king, we make him a semi divine figure. We misunderstand what it took to build change. We end up thinking about that movements are nothing but speeches. They're not. They're systems of people willing to stand in the fire.
A.D. King stood there.
And if we are serious about history, not mythology, then remembering him is not an option. It is corrective.
So let's place the core facts in one line of memory. Alfred Daniel A.D. King, born July 30th, 1930 in Atlanta, minister, organizer, movement enforcer of nonviolence. His home was bombed in Birmingham, May 11th, 1963, a leader in Louisville, Kentucky's open housing fight, culminating in a successful 1968 campaign for an open housing ordinance in Memphis on April 4th, 1968, when his brother Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Died July 21st, 1969, drowning at age 38, and his death was followed by lasting questions.
Just 9 days before his 39th birthday, Dr. Deneen.
Mm-hmm. That's not footnote material. That's a human life carrying disproportionate share of risk.
And it tells us what the polished versions of history do not. Dreams don't survive on inspiration alone. They survive because someone is willing to hold the line when the street turns hot.
We started, ladies and gentlemen, with a simple claim: history remembers the dreamer, but it forgets the brother who stood between the dream and the fire.
A.D. King's story does not replace Martin's. It completes the picture of what the movement required: discipline, toughness, leadership that never needed a podium, and a commitment to a philosophy of nonviolence and a philosophy that says, I will continue to strive and to try, and the belief that we shall overcome one fine day. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome.
Absolutely, Dr. Weaver. And some heroes deliver speeches that change minds. Others stepped into chaos so that communities don't burn. Now, A.D. King, He did both, often without credit, often without protection, and ultimately without the long life that his work deserved. Well, listen, we hope you have enjoyed this episode of Things You Don't Know, and we hope that you have learned a little bit about Dr. Martin Luther King's brother. And please don't diminish Dr. King because of this. Just add him to your knowledge of history and just put him alongside his brother as a man who tried to change the path of our people.
Yes. Thank you for tuning in today. And indeed, we shall overcome. One fine day, we shall overcome.
We shall, my friends, by the grace of God and the efforts of every one of us. Please leave a like and a comment. Come back and see us again soon.